And welcome to the August 4th, 2015 Planning and Zoning meeting. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then a moment of silence.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could please have roll call from left to right.
Anthony Sutton.
Mike Dolan.
John Grant.
Jean Servine.
Edward Mead.
Carl S. Moore.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Panzella.
Jim Quish.
And I am Ben Gettinger. Also present are David Sulkis, City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, Board Clerk. The first item on the agenda is CCG 8-24 approval, 21 Daniel Street. Is there anyone from the city present?
That would be me. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. I'm Attorney Matthew Woods, trial counsel for the City of Milford. General Statute Section 8-24 provides in applicable part that no municipal agency or legislative body shall lease any municipally owned property until the proposal to take such action has been referred to the commission or board for a report. In the event that the board recommends disapproving the application, the board must state the reasons, and they have to be transmitted to the legislative body of the town. A proposed disapproval by the commission shall be adopted by the municipality only after the subsequent approval of the proposal by a 2/3 vote of the Board of Aldermen. The Supreme Court has said that a report issued by a Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to a Section 8-24 referral is purely advisory and is not appealable. No appeal exists where a Planning and Zoning Commission issues a decision that is merely preliminary and not binding without further action by a municipal agency. The way 8-24 applications have been handled, at least for the past 20 years, and perhaps Mr. Sulkis can correct me if there's an exception, is that the mayor submits a request to the Planning and Zoning Board for a request to purchase property, sell property, or lease property, and has the city attorney prepare the necessary documents for the Planning and Zoning Board and subsequently the Board of Aldermen to consider and approve or disapprove. If the Planning and Zoning Board decides to approve a proposed lease, the lease form has already been prepared. It can consider the specifics of the lease and decide whether the board believes that it's in the best interest of the municipality to report favorably to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen likewise can look at the document and make a decision whether they think the proposed, in this case, lease is in the best interest of the city. You have no lease in front of you to consider. You have a request for a similar proposal that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board back in 2003. I'm sorry, 2005, where the applicant was Mr. Conine, and the stated purpose, according to the minutes of the July 11, 2005 Planning and Zoning Board meeting, was that people were coming out into the front for smoking, so the area would also just be as safe for people to smoke. He stated that he was also addressing a safety concern, and he was looking for sound control and safety. And at that time, the Planning and Zoning Board and subsequently the Board of Aldermen approved the lease, which was executed by the City of Milford and by Mr. Conine. James Riccitelli at the time was the mayor. The lease was dated October 19, 2005, and ran for 5 years. In November of 2009, Mr. Conine sent a letter to the City Attorney's Office saying that the lease would end after the September 30, 2009 term. That lease, by the way, specifically provided that it does not run with the land and is personal to the grantee. It is non-assignable, and any attempt to assign this lease will terminate the lease privileges granted to grantee under the lease. It's been 10 years now, and the new proposal, as indicated, has not been reduced to written form. There's nothing for the board to consider other than a general proposal. There would likewise be nothing for the Board of Aldermen to consider other than a proposal. In the event that the Board of Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Aldermen both decided to approve the application, the lease would then have to be negotiated, and once the final lease was approved, we believe it would have to come back to the Board of the Planning and Zoning Board and again to the Board of Aldermen to approve the specific lease, because you can't approve a concept, you can only approve a specific transaction. And the position of the city is that unless at least the majority of the immediate neighbors for this proposal are in favor of the lease, then the city will not support it. And that's the position that I'm here to advocate tonight.
Thank you. Any comments from staff?
The only reason why this item is on the agenda, it was a result of a meeting that I had and Director Griffith had with City Attorney Burcham, where at that meeting it was decided and had been reiterated to us at that meeting that anybody can submit an 824 to the board. In the past, it hasn't just been the mayor, it's been other city agencies, and in this case, it's a member of the public. So that's the reason why this is on the agenda tonight. And we were told specifically that to tell you that, again, this is to approve a concept for something that this board has already previously approved. The 2005 approval for this patio included not just the patio, it was an entire site plan that is part of the record that this board not only approved in 2005, but we, the city, gave permits for in 2007. So that's why it was explained to me that this is just, a conceptual thing, because what's ultimately going to happen is if the Board of Aldermen or if the mayor wants to go ahead and draft the lease, you've given them their okay. But I was told to tell you that the particulars of a lease, just like the particulars of any other lease that you've sometimes been provided with and sometimes not been provided with, you don't get to comment on. It's always the concept, and that's how it was explained to me. So,
thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Servine.
So I understand that we're not here to discuss the pros and cons of whether we think this should happen or not, but merely to agree that party can enter into a lease with the city. On our agenda, it says they're seeking our approval to enter a lease agreement with the city of Milford. So we're just here to say, yes, anyone can try to deal with the city and get a lease in that manner.
I've got to say that I only heard every other word you said.
Smart. Can you hear me now? Better. On our agenda, it reads that Mr. Ciardiello is seeking approval, our approval, merely to enter into a lease agreement with the city of Milford, not to discuss the pros and cons of whether we do or don't want to see this patio, but merely that we would give our approval to enter into a lease agreement with no comment about the details of that lease, just the concept of the lease. Is that correct?
Well, that's what your agenda says.
But isn't that, they don't need our approval to enter into a lease agreement with the city. I mean, they enter into the lease, they can enter into anything with the city, and then it would come before this board for us to approve the lease. Is that correct?
Well, the mayor cannot sign a lease unless the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Aldermen both approve it. The mayor can negotiate the lease and have it reduced to written form and present that to you for your consideration and to the Board of Aldermen. But the mayor can't sign it without your approval.
I guess one concern I have is, do we have any examples of when a private citizen brought an 8-24 application? I mean, essentially what they're doing is they're asking us to approve them acquiring city land. Is that correct?
Well, they're asking,
in this case, to lease city land.
they're asking for the Planning and Zoning Board and ultimately the Board of Aldermen to approve the concept of a lease. But what I'm saying is that I don't believe that Section 8-24 allows for the approval of a concept. I think it requires something specific for the two boards to consider. Because how can you report favorably to the Board of Aldermen unless you know what the provision is? The rental payment 10 years ago was $2,500 a year. Unless you know what the rental is, how can you report favorably that you approve the concept?
Simply put, you're saying this is premature and that they need to do other stuff and then come back before the board.
Well, that's my personal opinion. Evidently, Mr. Sulkus came away from a meeting with a different opinion.
Any additional questions from the board? Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know how many other city properties are leased to property owners that they abut to, by any chance?
I do not know. Maybe Mr. Sulkus knows.
Your comment just said that if you represent the city on the city attorney side and Mr. Sulkus represents us on our board side, who are we supposed to listen to? You know, you're to represent the whole city and the taxpayers and us too, but Mr. Sulkus and the director are our heads of our department. So.
You might as well ask me how many parcels of land does the city own? I don't know. I'd have to research it. I don't know how many parcels the city owns that it is leased to private citizens as a result of an 8-24 process. I'm not aware of any leases of city property that originated with a request by the lessee to the Planning and Zoning Board to initiate the 8-24 procedure, if that's what your question is.
Most of the 824s that come to us through the mayor's office first?
Yes, or through some other agency or commission that the mayor initiated. In other words, to some extent, we're putting the cart before the horse here.
And that's what I was getting at when I asked if it was premature. I mean, it seems like, and I think this happened last time that this applicant was before us, is they wanted to build on a patio and they didn't have the property yet, and I believe the board agreed that they needed to go and negotiate with the city and then come back with something tangible for us to look at and make a decision on. I'm uncomfortable with a concept. I mean, we don't know what the concept is. Are they going to pay the city $1 million for it? Are they going to pay the city $1 for it? Is it, you know, I'd like to see something tangible before I vote on a concept.
Well, what the board did at its August 6, 2013 meeting, and in fact, Mr. Chairman, you weren't the chairman then, but you made a motion to approve the petition of John Wicko, architect, for a special permit and site plan review to construct a full-service restaurant with 3 residential apartments on the subject property, of which Richard Ciardello is the owner, which includes denying without prejudice the outdoor dining patio. And that was seconded, and that motion carried. So you approved the special permit and site plan review minus the outdoor dining patio, which would have to be constructed on city property with a lease from the city that you hadn't yet considered.
And it seems like we're back all over again with the same problem. We don't have anything to evaluate. We have a concept, and it seems like it's premature, so.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify something. That although the board did what Mr. Wood said that they did in 2013, that was against staff advice because the board had approved that very patio, again, as shown on the site plan previously in 2005, and again in 2007 when permits were issued on it. So just for clarity's sake, to say that the patio was rejected by the board is factually incorrect. It was approved by the board.
In 2005 and then rejected in 2013.
No, and you have to understand, we issued permits on it. It was approved and we issued permits on it.
In what year?
2007, after this board approved the last lease agreement.
Well, again, I mean, this is more confusing than it has to be. We have nothing to evaluate. We have a concept. We're not in the business of deciding on concepts. So if anyone else wants to speak, Mr. Sutton.
I just have a question that perhaps staff or Attorney Woods can answer. The lease that we're talking about that preceded the 2005 approval and the 2007 permits, that is no longer valid or in force. Is that correct? And this would be a lease to replace such a lease. So there's no active lease that binds the city or the current applicant.
That's correct.
Any further questions or comments? Mr. Mead?
Yes, sir, and through you, Mr. Sokas, if the permits were already issued, but the lease has expired, are the permits still valid for that development?
Well, if there's no lease, yeah, that's a good question. I defer to the attorneys for that.
If there's no lease, then the private party has no right to use the city property.
But Mr. Woods, didn't you say that the lease did not run with the land? So the prior lease is null and void. I mean, it's no longer current. So you did say it does not run with the land.
It specifically did not run with the land. This lease does not, this is paragraph 6. This lease does not run with the land and is personal to grantee. And the grantee was Daniel Street LLC. It is non-assignable, and any attempt to assign this lease will terminate the lease privileges granted to grantee under this lease. It was a 5-year lease, and even apart from the fact that the 5 years are up, the principal of Daniel Street LLC sent a letter November 30, 2009, canceling the lease. So the lease is doubly dead.
I may ask one more thing here. If we have choice here to approve what we have in front of us, or deny it, or to table it, but if we approve it, I'm just saying if we should approve it, does that mean we wouldn't see it again as an 8-24 if the lease is actually ever created?
Well, I would advise you not to table it, because if you table it, there's a deemed approval, 35 days. The failure of the commission to report within 35 days after the date of official submission of the proposal to it for report shall be taken as approval of the proposal. So if you let the 35 days go by, then you've deemed to have approved it. It then goes to the Board of Aldermen, who can independently decide whether to approve the concept.
I understand that. So tell me simply, if we deny it, what would be the result? If we approve it, what would be the result?
If you deny it,
what would be the result? And if we approve it, what would be the result?
If you deny the application, that is considered a report that gets forwarded to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen could then only approve the proposed lease by a 2/3 majority. If you approve the application tonight, it would be a favorable report to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen can then approve it by a simple majority. It doesn't require a supermajority. If the Board of Aldermen then approved it, what have you both approved? You've both approved only a concept, nothing for the mayor to sign because nothing has been negotiated. And if something was negotiated that was acceptable to the mayor and to the applicant, then we believe it would have to come back to the Board of Planning and Zoning Board to approve the specific lease, and then, assuming you approved it, back to the Board of Aldermen to consider the specific lease and decide whether to approve it.
Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. And so if we both boards approve it and it goes to the mayor's office and he doesn't sign it, then it's dead in the water. But if he signs it, then it should come back to us as a set of plans of, with the lease agreement signed, and then we approve that. Then it goes back to the Board of Aldermen for a vote?
Well, if both boards approved it, there would be nothing for the mayor to sign because nothing has been negotiated yet. If a lease was then negotiated, the mayor couldn't sign it until the two boards had approved the specific lease.
But if we both approve it, doesn't that show that the both boards are in favor of the mayor writing a lease with the property owner at that point?
But without any guidance, I mean, could the mayor sign a lease for $1? I don't think so. I think you have to approve the business terms as well as the concept of leasing city property to a private person for pecuniary advantage. I mean, obviously, the reason why the applicant wants this patio is because it enhances the business and makes money for the applicant. That's the reason why the applicant wants it. You have to decide whether, on the other hand, it would be equally good for the city to enter into this transaction for whatever reason, either the money that it derives directly as rent or because it enhances the downtown and contributes to the liveliness of downtown Milford. You've got to make a decision. But you can't make a decision to approve a lease where we don't even know what the rent would be.
Mr. Quish.
I'd like to make a motion to send an unfavorable report to the Board of Aldermen.
Having a motion, do we have a second? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone against? The motion passes. Was it? So the motion passes 8-2, with Mr. Mead and Mr. Grant opposing the motion.
No, I was for the motion.
No, Mr. Mead, Mr. Grant. It was 8-2. There was a motion for an unfavorable report. It passed 8-2 with 2 people in opposition. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is hazard mitigation update.
Good evening. My name is Megan McGaffin, GIS analyst for the City of Milford. I'm just here to take a few minutes of your time to do a brief presentation on the City of Milford's hazard mitigation plan. The purpose of the plan is to outline steps and strategies that Milford can take to mitigate against the loss of life and damage to property during natural disasters. We're almost halfway through hurricane season, and it's been very quiet this year. It's still important to be aware that our region typically experiences the bulk of our storms in the fall, which is why I'm here today. Public outreach is one of the priorities in the plan, and the Hazard Mitigation Committee asked to make a presentation to the Planning and Zoning meeting as this board and its audience is focused on personal property and development within the city. I'd like to take the opportunity to point out just a few resources available to residents for learning more about hazard mitigation. The plan itself can be found on the city website by typing hazard mitigation into the search box on the homepage or on the page for emergency management services. On the emergency management services page are a number of links to other important sources of information on preparing for and recovering from a disaster. Residents are encouraged to sign up for Milford Alerts, the city's emergency notification system. Residents can sign up online, by phone, fax, or email. On the city website, there's a sign-up page that can be found under important links or on the emergency services page. September is National Preparedness Month. The theme for this month is Don't Wait, Communicate. Make your emergency plan today. Residents are encouraged to make an emergency preparedness plan of their own. More information can be found on the emergency services page of the city website. Should a storm or flood impact the city, it's important to remember the National Weather Service slogan, "Turn around, don't drown." Walking or driving through floodwater is dangerous and should be avoided. Regarding floods, more than 25% of all the property owners in the city have land in a flood zone, which covers 1/3 of our city. The Planning and Zoning Department has a number of resources for residents who would like to inquire about the city's flood zones and purchasing flood insurance. They can be reached at 783-3245. In closing, the hazard mitigation plan is available online, and the city will be updating the plan again in 2018. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? No.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you very
it. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 20 Bridgewater Avenue.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Mundy. I'm a licensed land surveyor in the state of Connecticut. My mailing address is 300 Pepys Farm Road, Box 3158. I'm here representing Donmar Development for the Coastal Area Management Site Plan Review approval. Any questions?
That's your whole presentation?
Well, we went through the city departments. We have an extensive package. The existing survey, the site plan.
I'm not complaining. I like it. Any comments from staff?
According to Mr. Harris's report, the project complies with the yard requirements through the variances recorded in 2012-2015. The height is compliant with section 3.1.4.1 of the zoning regulations. The project is compliant with the coastal area management regulations 5.12.
Great. Any questions from the board? Seeing Mr. Mead raise his hand. Mr. Mead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. On the plans, there was nothing for the attic floor plan. Do you know?
There is no attic.
Well, what's in the third floor? Just
crawl space.
No mechanicals or anything?
Nothing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Pinzella?
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
Mr. Dolan seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor? Anyone against? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The next item on the agenda is request for bond return, Lynn Acres subdivision. Any comments from staff?
We're going to withhold 10%, which is the maintenance bond. So the amount of money that we would hold on to is $9,592, which is a requirement of our subdivision regulations.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Quish? Mr. Sutton? Having a motion by Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Quish. I would like to move for approval.
Mr. Moore seconds. All in favor? Motion passes. The next item on the agenda, 33 Schoolhouse Road, that's being continued until
August 18th.
that is being continued to the August 18th meeting. The next three items on the agenda are the related ones, and I believe we're going to take them up separately. It's public hearing closed 7/21/15, expires on 9/24/215. The first item is petition for zoning regulation change. Any, Mr. Quish?
I don't see any compelling reason that we should grant a zoning regulation change and would move to deny that.
I'm having a motion. Does anyone second?
I'll second that.
Having a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Servine.
I would just like to add that if there seemed to be an advantage for the city, there would be a point in discussing this, but I see no advantage to the city, and I also think it's a prime example of spot zoning in terms of the bad planning, of course, so I will certainly be voting against it.
Thank you. And just for clarification, Mr. Sulkus, this isn't subject to 8-30 appeal
That's correct.
requirements, okay? Having a motion and a second, any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor of denying? Motion passes unanimously. The second item on the agenda is petition for zone change, Wheelers Farm Road, East Rutland, zones DO 25 and R-A. Any discussion? Mr. Graham.
Again, I do not see any reason for adding an additional regulation. We have many apartment complexes in the city that are governed by what we have now, and they're operating very efficiently. So I do not see the need for this.
Any further comments? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Pinzella.
I'd like to make a motion to deny as submitted.
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of denial?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is Wheelers Farm Road, East Rutland. Petition of Milford developers for approval to construct an 180-unit multifamily rental apartment under 8-30G. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Quish?
Actually, I'd just like to make a motion to deny the application, and the reasons as follows. The site conditions and the potential for hazardous materials on the site have not been satisfactorily addressed. Number two, dubious statements regarding emergency access have not been satisfactorily addressed. Additionally, fire safety concerns for truck access on the site have not been satisfactorily addressed. The police commission had a negative view and had concerns that have not been addressed. I believe the emotional health of the community is negatively affected. I see that the proposed development is too dense and not in the best interest of the neighborhood. And it is my position that the need for affordable housing is not greater than the harm the development would cause the neighborhood and the community. I would also encourage discussion, and maybe if there are other members who would like to add to that motion, we could collect those thoughts and add those to the motion as well.
Thank you. I would like to eventually add to the motion. I'm also against the motion, but I would like to add to it. I believe it was a Mr. Nichols specifically put forth contaminants that may have been in the soil and not tested because of the car and the car parts, and specifically that was lead, asbestos, and I believe MPBE. And he presented documents and materials from the state of Connecticut saying that there is a risk of those materials and they would not be in the portion of the soil tested. They'd actually seep through. So I would like to make sure that's articulated in the motion. I'd also like to add the fact that a long time ago, when I think it was the first meeting, somebody made the point, someone from the audience, that that was in the construction industry, that not only would the complex, once it's finished, be a health hazard, but constructing it would also be a health hazard. And he testified how many trucks and trips you would need and the materials that you would need. And given the size of the street, I think that would also be a health and safety hazard. And then I would also just like to add, I believe it was Senator Schlossberg who testified that around the back there were some windows that a truck couldn't get to, and it would be virtually impossible if there was a fire there to save anyone in those rooms. So in addition to what Mr. Quish said, I'd like to add those to the motion. Any further discussion? Ms. Servine?
I would like to discuss this and state that I don't think I will be voting for denial, and I'm interested that we have enough evidentiary facts to substantiate what some of the conditions are or the reasons why we denied. I would just like to put forward what conditions I would put on an approval. The conditions that I would put on for approval would be, one, repair the traffic light that the applicant has agreed to do, that the East Rutland access be outfitted with locked gates accessible only to emergency vehicles and the access kept clear and passable condition, that the applicant submit an affidavit to the file that confirms that the East Rutland access is usable by all emergency vehicles. I would suggest I would ask for an enclosed play lot for the children. And I'm very aware that the Inland Wetlands Agency with the city's consultant, their consultant did a very thorough job of working through the stormwater issues, and I would like to, I would add as a condition, if anybody else agrees with me, to approve that in addition to the stormwater testing required by the Inland Wetland Agencies in their number 12 point that testing continue for 18 months after completion of construction done at 3-month intervals using the guidelines spelled out in the Inland Wetlands Agreement. What else did I want? I also would like to see the addition of 6 more visitors parking spots. And I'm just putting that out there for discussion, so there's nothing more.
Any comments or further discussion? I would like to just simply say, I agree with that strategy for some applications, but if there's not a safety and health risk, or at least one bringing to the courts with this application, we might as well just rubber stamp all these applications. I mean, again, we have lead, asbestos, fire hazard, trucks that can't get in and out, and I just think for this specific application, there's more than enough to bring to a court, and I think there's enough to survive an appeal, but I'd just be much more comfortable at least giving the neighbors the opportunity to have this brought to a court instead of just granting it because we're scared that it's going to get overturned. I'm not saying that you're doing that. I'm just that seems to be a theme with these, and again, there's a lot here, and if this doesn't warrant a court look at, then I don't know what application would. So I'm against the conditions, and I'm for the strict denial.
If I may just say, Mr. Chair, I think the issue with the toxins, not just the pesticides, but the hydrocarbons there's some concern about the hydrocarbons are what come from the automobile residue, that the consultant for the Inland Wetlands Agency was very, I think, was very conscientious about dealing with that, and that would show up in any stormwater runoff if they continue the testing as I've asked. I also think that we're in trouble, as we've known before. And I don't like this at all, but we know the police department signed off on it. We know the fire department signed off on it. What can we say? I'm not happy that that's the case, but that is the case, and I think that's what will stand up in the court. So my position is, I'm not happy with any of this, but my position is what we've talked about once before in this board, that we might get more accomplished if we vote with conditions rather than if we deny. And I know many may not be in agreement with me, but that's my position. With full understanding and compassion for the neighbors, I hope, and realizing what restrictions we work within.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Nickel.
Yeah, along those lines, I know Inland Wetland approved this, but in some of these cases, I see a very fragile ecosystem over there where you cannot wash your car. However, you can bring all of the residue in from the roads, the salt, the sand, the chemicals that are put down before and after every storm, and then drive into this parking area to have it melt and flow right back into the ecosystem. I think this system is so fragile that I could never vote for anything like that. And the other subjects were brought up, so I'm not going to go there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Just to add, more than just the concept of health concerns that I had with this specific proposal. And when I think of affordable housing, I think of affordable housing that will increase the use of public transportation, shorten commutes, and lessen congestion. And where this proposal is acting on, I don't see in any way this is happening in this case. So I'm going to deny this case.
Any further comments? Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm sure everyone realizes, this particular case has been a very difficult decision for all of us to process. We've had a very extensive public hearing, and we've heard from residents, we've heard from the developer. It was my thought that perhaps if certain conditions could be met, this possibly be workable. But I'd have to say that I think on the whole, because of the issues that have been raised by the residents, the experts, and the lack of a defined answer to the questions of the soil testing and the emergency access, that I think significant public health and safety issues exist that would support the city's position should this be appealed. And of course, as we've seen with recent applications, should the appeal go forward, during that pendency of the appeal, that certainly may well be a time that the city and the developer could negotiate to address any of the concerns that we have.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Dolan.
Yeah, I have to say that I agree with what Gene said previously. I don't like the application per se. I don't blame the neighbors for being against it. I certainly would not want it in my neighborhood, but I honestly don't know if it's going to hold up under court scrutiny. It sounds like the motion is going to fail, and I hope it does, but I just don't think it will. So I'm going to be, I am in favor of it as presented.
Thank you. Any further, Mr. Pinzella?
I just want to go on record as saying that there is significant health and safety concerns here, and there's absolutely no way that I can approve this application.
Thank you. Any further, Mr. Veen?
I just want to add again that I think we need evidentiary facts here to back up the denial. So if there's anybody else that can give us some real evidentiary facts right now to go into the record, now is the time to do it.
I think the list that Mr. Cush put together was pretty in-depth, and I think that covers just about everything.
And Mr. Cush, you may want to amend it and add some of the stuff that was said after your motion, if you could remember.
You know, I'm comfortable with what you added to it. I mean, I don't know if we need a separate motion to amend, but I think I left, the way I worded the motion, I left it open for comment, and you made 3 salient points. And if anyone else, I mean, we can maybe have Phyllis read them back, and if there's a gap in anyone's mind, that we can add another one, and then I can offer the amendment as fully fleshed out.
I'd be more comfortable amending it to including the specific contaminants in addition to other ones, lead, asbestos, MPBE, and the fact that somebody brought materials saying that it wouldn't have been detected in the soil testing. So we have incomplete soil testing. We have materials that contain those contaminants, and therefore a logical conclusion is that those contaminants went somewhere and they wouldn't have been caught in the soil testing that was done.
Okay.
Well, having a motion, do we have a second? Mr. Pinzella seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a motion for denial. All in favor? All against? Motion passes 8-2. items on the agenda, I guarantee you don't want to stick around for, so we'll take a 5-minute break, let you guys leave, and then we'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we're back on the record. The next item on the agenda is liaison report. Any report, Mr. Mead?
They're on vacation.
They're on vacation. Ms. Servine.
I have a good one, I hope. Last night at the Board of Aldermen meeting, Mr. Griffith was there, and the Board of Aldermen created 2 ordinances. One that pertains to us is that we can now ask applicants to pay a fee so that we can hire any consultants that we may need that would be nice to have in place for this past month or 2 or 3 or 4. There are a lot of details to it, but the problem is the time frame, of course, in terms of when we get applicants and applications and how we can negotiate a consultant within the time period that's allowed. But there was some talk about how it's decided what applications this can be applied to or not, and in general, maybe Mr. Griffith would like to speak to it. Do you want to add anything to that?
What I came away from the Board of Aldermen discussion last night was that in implementing this, not implementing the ordinance, but in utilizing the terms of the ordinance, is that we are to, I guess, exercise considerable discretion in terms of, looking at only very complex applications and the details of very complex applications, and bringing in consultants to look at the particulars of those applications, as opposed to using this as a tool to sandbag. So I think that's kind of the, like I said, what I took away from that discussion last night.
So had that ordinance been enacted, we could have got our own traffic study and an 830G application?
Specifically, yes. If there were questions specific about the traffic, about the contaminants in the soil, if that was applicable to the planning and zoning discussion, yes, I think we would be looking to take in consultants and have a third party review the findings of the reports that were submitted.
It's now an ordinance, and I guess it goes into effect immediately because it was agreed to by the Board of Aldermen. And my next question was, I know we've got a few things that may already be at the office. Would this ordinance hold for those, or would it be new applications that come in?
I think we can apply it at any point in time.
What's a little frustrating is this was before the Board of Aldermen a year ago, and they voted it down for fear that it would cramp development. So, and I also want to add to this, having been on the board for some years, that we've been trying for this at different times over the years, and it's never happened. So if we can use it right, this could be a very, very good thing for us.
I agree.
Excellent. Mr. Quish.
Just like to get a copy of the language of that so we can read it and understand it the way it was written. So if we could get an email to each of us from somebody.
Actually, they made a couple amendments. I have one copy here, but I've written all over it. They made a couple amendments to it. One was where the finances would be deposited. I guess the money from the applicant would be put in a special fund.
To a special fund account as opposed to into an escrow account.
There's another amendment as well. I don't remember.
For the planning and zoning, they added some language, and I can't use the specifics, but it was to kind of better define the scope of this of the work.
The decision could be made by staff or by the board.
Thank you. Any other reports? Seeing none, Regulation Subcommittee, if I could make a recommendation that we make a motion just to approve to send them all to the city attorney instead of doing it one by one, but Mr. Grant, you could speak to that.
Second that big time.
So having a motion and a second, any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion passes. City attorney will get those for comments. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Approval of minutes. Ms. Servine? A motion, Mr. Dolan seconds. All in favor? Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is Chair's report. I do not have a report. Mr. Veen, do you have any new business?
I do have a few things I'd like to bring up because I am, for discussion, I'm, as the rest of us are, I think, fully frustrated with the reports we get from the fire department and the police department. And we have every right to ask for more specifics from them when they give us these reports. I believe we do. And I would like to propose, we can discuss it, but I think we could create some kind of checklist, or we could ask them to be more specific in very defined ways about things like with the fire department, you know, the things that we might know and are implied, but the public doesn't know and we don't have it on record, like the turning radius and whether a road can take the tower trucks or any other kind of matters like that. I think we could ask Mr. Sulkus to help us with just creating a small checklist so that we'd have a little more information from the fire department and the police commission. Just my thoughts, but, you know.
Sounds like a good idea. It would have been helpful. Mr. Mead.
Along those lines, too, if there's a question that needs to be answered, I think we should try to get the person from each department to come here and answer them in person. Like, I go to the police commission meeting, and Mr. Dumas is in charge of the traffic study now, and he was kind of confused when I was there when first they denied it, and then they had to hold off for one more month, and it was more about the parking and not the traffic itself. So I think that's an issue that we should answer in person. So, Mr. Bean?
I fully agree with that. As it were, I think we need to hold their feet to the fire department and the police department. And in the minutes of the last, or one of the last police commission meetings, one of the commissioners actually said the traffic division staff are not traffic engineers, and she felt the city should set aside funds for the department to hire a traffic engineer. So they're, you know, we're the ones that are left with this. And we go to these things without an equal playing field. So I think this is one more thing that could help us in that regard.
Anything further? Mr. Moore.
Seems like that's going to be a difficult task. How do we pick and choose with applicant for certain commissions to come in and speak on? But I'm in favor of doing something such as this and having a detailed list of what's the applicant, you know, the commissions are signing off on is very important for us.
I think sometimes we overlook our authority in that regard, and that we have the right to ask any head of a department in to answer our questions within the right time frame.
Mr. Quish.
So two things. I think those are great ideas to try to get better accountability from police and fire. And I guess we're asking staff to come up with like a little strategy on how to go about it and what to ask them. I just want to circle back to the Rules Committee and thank John Grant for a lot of work. It really was, you know, we had, yeah.
I'm putting round 2 together, so.
Any other new business before we get to staff report? Any report from the staff? No report. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Motion passed.